It began with a locked door. Not the front door, not the back gate, not even the ironclad security system that lined the perimeter of Rob Reiner's $13.5 million Brentwood estate. No, it was the bedroom door, the one Rob started locking at night. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Why? That's the question investigators are still struggling to answer. But those closest to the legendary director say that wasn't something he ever used to do, until 2 weeks before he was murdered. That small, chilling detail was first shared by a family housekeeper, who later confided to a close friend. He started sleeping with the door locked, said it helped him feel safer. That wasn't like him. But safer from what? Or from whom? This is the question at the center of a chilling, true Hollywood nightmare. A murder mystery that would drag the Reiner name through blood, betrayal, and buried secrets. And in the final moments before the crime, something happened inside that home that would shatter a family and stain a legacy forever. Because Rob Reiner wasn't just a beloved filmmaker. He was a father, a husband, a man who had built his life around storytelling, and who, in his last weeks alive, may have been living a story darker than anything he ever dared to direct. And it all ended in blood. 2 bodies, 1 arrest, too many questions. Are you ready? Because what you're about to hear may change how you see this family forever. Let's begin. For decades, Rob Reiner was one of Hollywood's most enduring storytellers. From The Princess Bride to A Few Good Men, from Stand By Me to Misery, he painted stories of love, fear, loyalty, and justice. But no script he ever touched could prepare anyone for the twisted tragedy that would unfold inside his own home. On Sunday, December 14th, Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michelle Singer, 70, were found stabbed to death inside their estate in the affluent neighborhood of Brentwood, Los Angeles. The crime scene was brutal. The autopsy report would later list multiple sharp force injuries as the cause of death for both victims. The manner? Homicide. They didn't die together. That's what the coroner suggested. Rob likely died first. Michelle tried to fight back. That detail, small, awful, deeply human, sent a shiver through even the most seasoned homicide detectives. Because whatever happened that night, it wasn't clean. It wasn't calculated. It was messy, personal, and it happened just feet away from someone the Reiners knew well. Their son, Nick Reiner, 32, was arrested at the scene, in a dazed state, covered in blood. He had been living in the guest house on the property, steps from where his parents died. He has since been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The story, as the public was told, sounded devastating but contained. A troubled son, a quiet night, a horrific breakdown. But that version of the story was only the surface. Because beneath it, beneath the headlines, the courtroom appearances, the mugshots, lies something far more disturbing. There were warnings. There were signs, and there were secrets, the kind no family ever wants uncovered, including one whispered warning from inside the Reiner family that was ignored. Ignored until it was far too late. It was their daughter, Romy Reiner, who discovered the bodies. A 27-year-old writer and actress, Romy had grown distant from her brother Nick over the years. Sources say their relationship had become strained, fractured by years of tension, addiction, and what one close friend described as growing fear. But on that Sunday afternoon, Romy reportedly came to the house to visit her parents, something she hadn't done in weeks. What she walked into was every child's nightmare. The first thing she noticed was the silence. No music playing, no footsteps, just nothing. Then she saw the blood, then her father's body, then her mother's, and finally, the door to the guest house. It was unlocked. Inside, Nick was allegedly found barefoot, disoriented, and muttering to himself. Officers arrived minutes later. He was taken into custody without resistance. But it was what Romy told the police that shocked investigators even more than the bodies. She said one thing, just one sentence, but it changed the investigation overnight. "I told them months ago," she reportedly said. "I told them Nick should be a suspect." That's where this story splits in two. Because from that moment on, the investigation didn't just focus on what happened. It started asking why everyone ignored the signs. And who else knew this was coming? Over the next few weeks, more and more details began to leak. The Brentwood house had a sophisticated surveillance system, But key footage was missing. The guest house had been modified with locks from the inside. A burned piece of paper was found in the kitchen trash, believed to be a will or letter. And then there was the phone call. At exactly 9:17 p.m., the night before the murder, Rob Reiner received a call from a prepaid burner phone. The call lasted just over 6 minutes. The caller has never been identified, but a partial audio log was recovered from a connected cloud backup, and one haunting phrase was heard clearly. If he finds out, it's over. No one has confirmed who he was, but everyone involved has their theory, because this wasn't just a murder. This was a family implosion, with layers of resentment, guilt, addiction, money, and silence. And now, the public wants answers. But maybe they're not ready for them. Because every new detail, every uncovered clue, points to something darker than anyone expected. A guest house that may have been hiding more than just a troubled son. A family member whose name disappeared from the suspect list, without explanation. A therapist's report never followed up. A final phone call that still haunts everyone who's heard it. And a daughter who begged them all to listen, only to become the one left to find the bodies. Still think you've heard everything? You haven't. Because what comes next are the 7 darkest secrets about Rob Reiner's final weeks. And trust us, they will ruin your day. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Why was Nick Reiner still living in the guest house? That's the question everyone's been asking, and no one seems eager to answer. A 32-year-old man, no steady job, no public projects in the pipeline. Yet he was still residing just yards from the mansion he grew up in, quietly tucked away in a detached structure nestled at the back of the Brentwood estate. To the outside world, it might have looked like a son staying close to home, maybe to help aging parents, maybe for support, maybe just convenience. But the truth? That guest house wasn't a sanctuary. It was a containment zone, a hidden prison with plush furniture and hardwood floors. Because the truth is, Rob Reiner didn't want Nick in the main house anymore, and he hadn't for months. Let's rewind. 6 months before the murders, Rob Reiner reportedly had a conversation with Michelle that would later haunt him. According to a former assistant who's since spoken under the condition of anonymity, Rob said something chilling. "I don't recognize him anymore. He's not our son. He's someone else." The assistant thought it was just frustration, maybe exhaustion. But in hindsight, it was something far more terrifying. Because Nick had changed. Again, you see, this wasn't the first time Nick Reiner had spiraled. His struggles with substance abuse weren't a secret. In fact, he and his father even co-wrote a 2015 film Being Charlie based on Nick's real-life rehab experiences. At the time, it was seen as a raw, cathartic attempt at healing, a public acknowledgement of past pain, a sign that Nick was on the mend. But healing is never linear. And privately, behind the red carpets and recovery talk shows, things were unraveling again. Nick had moved back into the guest house shortly after his most recent stint in rehab, reportedly at a luxury facility in Santa Barbara. Friends say Rob and Michelle were hesitant but hopeful. They'd been through this before. "Maybe this time it'll stick," Michelle supposedly said. But almost immediately, red flags began to appear. There were nights Nick didn't come home. Other nights when he came home too late, slamming doors, mumbling, chain-smoking behind the pool house. One neighbor described hearing loud arguments at least twice a week, screaming matches, furniture banging, someone crying. It wasn't normal. But perhaps the most disturbing detail? The locks. Not just any locks, custom-installed deadbolts and double-latch security doors, all added to the guest house just weeks after Nick returned. Locks that could only be opened from the inside. When asked by a contractor about the request, Rob reportedly said, "Just do it. We need boundaries." Boundaries, a loaded word for any parent, but especially when it comes to a child who might also be a threat. So why didn't they just ask Nick to leave? That's the question detectives later posed during interviews with close friends of the family. The answer, heartbreakingly, was always the same. Because he's their son, even when Nick became erratic. Even when items began going missing from the main house. Jewelry, old family photos, prescription bottles. Even when the security system was upgraded and Rob started locking his own bedroom door at night. They didn't want to force him out. They wanted to help. But not everyone in the family agreed. In fact, Romy Reiner reportedly pushed hard for an intervention. According to someone close to her, a screenwriter friend who visited the estate just 2 months before the killings. Romy was deeply concerned. She'd stopped staying at the house when she visited from New York. She'd even begun parking on the street, refusing to pull into the gated driveway. She told me she didn't feel safe being there with Nick around, the friend said. Not because she thought he'd hurt her, but because of the vibe, the unpredictability. She said it was like walking through static electricity. But there's one detail that hasn't been shared publicly until now. And it's about what was inside the guest house. Because when detectives began investigating the scene after the murders, they found something disturbing in the one place they didn't expect to. A hidden storage bench, hollow inside, beneath a faux leather cushion. Tucked inside were a hunting knife, a half-filled bottle of antipsychotic medication, and a folded notebook. The knife had traces of blood, old blood, not fresh. Its origin hasn't been publicly confirmed. The medication? Prescribed 6 months earlier. Never refilled. But it's the notebook that really raised alarms. Because inside were pages and pages of handwritten monologues. Stories. Scenes. But not just creative fiction. They were disturbingly specific. Some appeared to be diary entries written from a perspective that wasn't Nick's. Others read like scripts, describing gruesome scenarios involving parents who refuse to see the truth, a sister who smiles through her lies, and a character named the director who only pretends to control the story. One page, written in frantic, overlapping loops, read, "I am the real writer. This is my story. I decide how it ends." Another, "They made a movie out of me. Now I'll make one out of them." The investigators took this as both metaphor and manifesto, and it flipped the investigation on its head. Because until that point, there had still been speculation. Had someone broken in? Could this have been a random attack? Was there an external threat? But the guest house held the answers, and they were darker than anyone expected. Here's another twist. 2 weeks before the murders, a local contractor was called in to check the plumbing in the guest house. While working under the sink, he claimed to overhear part of a phone conversation, Nick pacing outside, speaking loudly into his phone. The contractor would later tell police, "I didn't hear much, but I remember one thing he said, real clear." He said, "They think they're untouchable, but the story's not over. Not until I say cut." At the time, the contractor brushed it off, thought it was a writer being dramatic. Now, he wishes he'd told someone sooner. And there's more. Security logs show that, on several occasions in the weeks before the murders, Nick would enter the main house late at night, despite being told not to. Despite the boundaries. At least twice, a silent alarm was triggered from the hallway outside the master bedroom. And each time, Rob would call the security company and cancel the alert. When asked why he didn't report the intrusions, Rob reportedly said, "It's just Nick. He gets confused sometimes. I'll talk to him." But did he? Did he ever really confront his son about what was happening? Or was he afraid of what would happen if he did? Then there's the most damning detail. A text message found on Rob's phone, sent just 2 nights before his death, to a contact saved as therapist Dr. Langston. The message read, "He's slipping again. I think he might hurt himself. Or someone else. Can you come tomorrow?" The reply was never received. The therapist was out of town. The appointment was never made. And 2 days later, Rob and Michelle were dead. So, we circle back to the guest house. That quiet, shadowed building at the back of the estate. To some, it was just an outbuilding, a place for overflow guests or older kids. But to the Reiners, it had become a pressure cooker, a ticking time bomb filled with resentment, frustration, failed healing, and a son who saw himself not as the problem, but as the narrator. And when the story didn't go the way he wanted, he rewrote the ending, in blood. But that's not the only warning that was ignored, because someone did speak up. Someone said, out loud, that danger was coming. And no one listened, not until the screams started, and by then, it was already too late. What would you do if you saw it coming, but no one believed you? Would you scream louder? Would you walk away? Or would you quietly brace for the crash, knowing no one was going to stop it? That's the haunting question that circles every moment of Romy Reiner's final weeks before the murders of her parents. And for those who knew her, one thing is painfully clear. She tried to warn them, but no one listened. Not Rob, not Michelle, not even the people closest to Nick. And what makes it worse? She might have been the only one who truly understood what was building inside that house. Rob Reiner, 27, had always played a quieter role in the public eye. The daughter of Hollywood royalty, she dabbled in writing, dipped into indie film, and stayed far from the spotlight that followed her father's career. But behind the scenes, Romy wasn't just watching a family fall apart. She was trying to hold it together. For months, she'd been sending messages. Not cryptic ones, not vague hints. Clear, direct words of concern that Nick was unraveling and that something was dangerously wrong. The earliest warning came in a voice note she left for her childhood friend, Mia, on October 3rd. "It's getting worse, Mia. I don't know how to explain it. He stares at me like I'm not real. He talks to himself. I caught him drawing these awful things. It's like he's somewhere else. I tried to tell Mom, but she says he's just emotional." What does that even mean? That message, recovered later from Mia's phone by investigators, was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, Romy began pulling away from her family home. Despite living only 20 minutes away, she stopped attending Friday night dinners. She stopped calling her brother altogether. And when she did visit, she wouldn't enter the main house unless both her parents were there. She was scared, Mia later told police. Not like afraid of being attacked, but scared that she was watching someone get ready to break. She said it was like watching the fuse burn toward the bomb. And here's where things get even more chilling. Romy didn't just talk to friends. She reportedly tried to intervene. On November 6th, she sat down with her parents for what was supposed to be a brunch in Beverly Hills. The location? A quiet rooftop restaurant where Rob and Michelle liked to eat when they wanted privacy, according to a waiter who served their table. And recognized Rob Reiner immediately. The conversation started light, but turned tense quickly. She was crying, the waiter said. He was shaking his head. The mom was just staring down at her tea. It looked heavy, like something bad was happening. The bill was paid early. The food was left untouched. And as the three left, Romy was overheard saying, "You're going to regret this. I'm telling you, something bad is coming." That line, now infamous, has become one of the most quoted pieces of evidence in the case. Because it wasn't just dramatic. It was prophetic. 1 week later, Romy sent her father an email. "We've seen it. Here's what it said verbatim. Subject, about Nick. Dad, I know you're tired of hearing this. I know you want to believe he's getting better, but he's not. You keep saying he's creative, he's processing, he just needs space. But what if it's not that? What if he's not processing anything? What if he's planning something? I've seen the way he looks at you. At Mom. At me. There's something off. I don't want to lose you. Please listen. R." The email was never responded to. Whether Rob read it is still unknown. Investigators couldn't verify if it was opened, but it was marked as delivered. And if that wasn't enough, she sent the same message to her mother the next day. Michelle did respond, but her reply was short, detached. "Thanks for worrying, honey. He's just overwhelmed. We've got it under control. I love you." 3 weeks later, she was dead. So what made Romy so sure? What did she see that her parents didn't? To answer that, we have to go back to September and a birthday party that no one talks about anymore. It was a small gathering, just family, no media, no press. Romy's 27th, held on the estate patio. Candles, string lights, wine, her favorite chocolate cake, and Nick. At first, he seemed okay. He gave a short toast. He hugged Romy. He smiled for photos. But as the night wore on, something changed. He got quiet, then snappy, then full-blown angry. Romy reportedly asked him to take a break from the wine. He accused her of trying to erase him. Later that night, she found him in her old bedroom, going through her drawers. When she confronted him, he muttered something she never forgot. "You always got the ending. I got cut in the first scene." She didn't tell her parents about that moment until the brunch in November. By then, it was already spiraling. 1 week before the murders, Romy made her final attempt. She contacted a family friend, a retired LAPD detective who had known the Reiners for decades. She asked if there was anything that could be done to flag someone mentally unstable but not yet violent. The friend reportedly explained that unless there was a direct threat or documented incident, there was little police could do. She was devastated. According to a text she sent to Mia later that night, "I feel like I'm watching the movie from the end credits. No one's in the theater but me, and I can't rewind it." She was spiraling, but she wasn't wrong. December 14th. The day it all collapsed. Romy arrived at the estate that morning, unannounced. She hadn't told her parents she was coming. She didn't want Nick to know. She wanted to talk. One more time. Try one more time. What she found instead was silence, blood, and horror. But here's the part no one ever wants to say out loud. Romy knew she might be the one to find them. In her diary, recovered from her West Hollywood apartment 2 weeks later, she'd written an entry dated December 10th. If something happens, it won't be a stranger. It won't be a break-in. It'll come from the guest house. And they'll all say they didn't see it coming. But I did. God help me, I did. She wrote those words 4 days before she walked into a blood-soaked home. For days before she screamed until her voice gave out. For days before she was placed in the back of a cruiser for welfare protection, trembling, her hands shaking, her whole body going cold. No child should ever find their parents like that. But no child should ever be ignored when they try to stop it, either. And here's the final, heartbreaking twist. According to case sources, Romy was later asked during her police interview, "Did you ever believe he'd actually go through with something like this?" She didn't answer right away. She sat still for nearly a minute, then whispered, "Yes, that's why I'd beg them." Silence. She tried to speak again, but couldn't. Her voice cracked. Her body tensed. She buried her face in her hands. And the officer said nothing. Because what could they say? What can anyone say to someone who saw the crash coming and still couldn't stop it? Romy's warnings are now being examined as part of a broader inquiry. Why weren't they taken seriously? Did the family's fame blind them to the danger? Did love override logic? Or did fear make them freeze until it was too late to move at all? The answers may never be clear. But what is clear is that she tried. She reached out. She screamed into the void. And the silence that answered her was deafening. But that silence didn't end with the murders. Because when police opened the crime scene, they didn't just find bodies. They found something that would shake the investigation to its core. And what they uncovered changed everything they thought they knew about that night. At first, it looked like a straightforward, if horrific, double homicide. 2 victims. Multiple stab wounds. A weapon found at the scene. And a suspect, their son, arrested on the property, covered in blood. It was open and shut. Until it wasn't. Because within hours of securing the Brentwood estate, police stumbled upon a series of details, some small, some chilling, and some impossible to explain, that flipped the entire case upside down. And what they found changed everything. Let's start with the bodies. Rob Reiner was found in the hallway just outside the master bedroom. His body positioned partially on his side, one arm raised as if trying to shield his face. Michelle Reiner's body was found several feet away, inside the bedroom. She had what investigators described as defensive wounds on her arms, her hands, even her forearms. Signs of a struggle. But here's where it gets eerie. Between the 2 bodies was a single, handwritten note. Not typed, not printed. Written in blue ink on yellow legal paper, folded once. No envelope, no signature, just 5 words. "You should have believed me." It wasn't signed. It wasn't addressed. And for a moment, detectives thought, could it be a suicide note? But there was no body to match a suicide. Only Nick, arrested without resistance, sitting on the patio steps, glassy-eyed and silent. The note was taken in for analysis. Handwriting experts were called in. It was compared to Nick's known writing samples. And then something strange happened. The match was inconclusive. Not a 100% denial, but also not a confirmation. Because while parts of the writing bore resemblance to Nick's scrawl, others did not. Specifically, the curvature of the B in believed and the sharp angle of the V in half. One forensic analyst said it best. It's either Nick trying to disguise his writing, or someone else entirely. And just like that, the open and shut case cracked open. Because if someone else wrote that note, then someone else might have been there. Then came the surveillance review. The Reiner estate had a high-end system, state-of-the-art cameras, infrared sensors, smart locks, and cloud-based backups. And at first, it seemed everything was working. But when detectives pulled footage from the night of December 14th, there was a gap. A 47-minute black hole between 11:13 p.m. and 12 a.m. Gone. Wiped. No power outage. No storm. No glitch. Just gone. When tech experts examined the footage logs, they noticed something chilling. The data hadn't just vanished. It had been manually deleted. From inside the house. accessed from the tablet located on Rob's nightstand, which was found shattered on the floor. So the question became, who deleted the footage? Nick? Then why would he leave the note? Why not wipe everything clean? Why leave his prints on the murder weapon? Why stay at the scene? Or was someone else trying to frame him? Someone who knew exactly how to trigger the family implosion and then slip out through the shadows? Theories began to form. Fast. And then something else was found. Something they weren't expecting. In the guest house, now a full-blown crime scene, detectives opened a cabinet under the kitchenette sink. Inside, a box of latex gloves. Unopened, except for one glove, missing. Its companion, found buried behind the bushes along the east side of the property. It was smeared with dried blood, not visible to the naked eye, but lit up instantly under luminol. DNA tests were conducted. The results? The blood belonged to Rob Reiner, but the DNA inside the glove didn't belong to Nick, or Michelle, or Romy. It matched a partial profile from a 2002 assault case in San Diego. The suspect, a man named Dean Lavelle, had never been convicted. His charges were dropped, but his DNA was entered into CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. So why was his profile inside a bloody glove found at the Reiner estate? And who the hell was Dean Lavelle? That's when the case cracked again, because investigators searched Dean's last known address and discovered he'd been renting a small apartment in West Hollywood, less than 3 miles from Romy's home. They also uncovered something else, a shared screenwriting workshop, held bi-weekly, with a roster list. And on that list, Dean Lavelle, Nick Reiner, Romy Reiner, all three. Same workshop. Now the question changed. Not was Nick guilty, but rather, who else had a reason to make it look like he was? Meanwhile, back at the estate, another discovery was made. Inside a locked drawer in Rob's study was a manila folder labeled only Inheritance 2023 Update. It contained a draft of Rob and Michelle's updated will, and signed but detailed. And what did it reveal? Nick was to be completely removed. Everything. The estate, the royalties, the residuals, the private accounts, would go to Romy. Nick's name didn't appear once, not even as a contingent beneficiary. And based on the timestamp note at the top, this draft had been finalized 6 days before the murder. It hadn't been signed yet, but the intent was clear. They were done. They had finally drawn the line. And someone, maybe Nick, maybe someone else, had found out. Maybe through a conversation. Maybe through a shared file on the home computer. Or maybe through a betrayal. Because the day after the murders, a call log from Nick's phone revealed an outgoing call made at 12:12 a.m., just minutes after the camera blackout. The number? Blocked, but later traced to a prepaid burner phone purchased at a downtown Los Angeles convenience store. And guess what? Surveillance footage from that store showed the purchase happening 3 days prior to the murders, by a woman, wearing a hoodie. Hair tucked up, face angled away from the camera. She paid in cash, and in her back pocket, a keychain, with a visible WGA tag, Writers Guild of America. Someone in the industry, someone in their circle, someone who might have known exactly what was about to happen, and how to control the narrative. So now, the LAPD was looking at a new theory. That Nick might have snapped, but not alone. That maybe someone else had been feeding him, fueling him, or worse, using him. The notebook filled with violent scenes, the guest house isolation, the missing footage, the glove with someone else's DNA, the note, it all pointed to something more orchestrated, less rage-fueled, more scripted. And then came the bombshell. Buried beneath a stack of old screenplays in Nick's desk drawer, police found a single USB flash drive, labeled Last Draft, Do Not Delete. It contained a file titled The GUESTHOUSE, a screenplay, unregistered, undated, but filled with characters who bore disturbing resemblance to the real Reiner family. A domineering director-father, a spiritual, soft-spoken mother, a younger sister who steals everything without realizing it, and a son, Jude, who lives in the guest house, cast out of the main home after breaking the family code. The climax? Jude murders the parents, then sits quietly on the back porch, waiting to be arrested, saying nothing, just smiling. In the margin of the final page, handwritten in red ink, were 4 words. End scene. Roll credits. Investigators stopped reading, because suddenly, this wasn't just a murder. It was a performance. A twisted rewrite of a life story that ended in tragedy. And the question on everyone's mind? Was this screenplay a blueprint? Or a confession? Or was it someone else's script altogether? Someone who handed Nick the pen and walked away before the curtain dropped? Either way, the case was no longer open and shut. It was messy, murky, sinister, because now there were too many unanswered questions. Why was that footage erased? Why was Nick sitting calmly? Why didn't he run? Why was there a note that might not be his? Why was his sister trying to warn everyone? And most terrifying of all, who else was supposed to be in the house that night, but never showed? Because there's one final piece to this chapter. At exactly 10:48 p.m., just before the camera blackout, the front gate security system logged an unsuccessful keycode entry. Someone tried to come in and failed. The system sent a text alert to Rob's phone. No one responded. And the code? It was assigned to a former family friend, a man whose name had been quietly removed from the suspect list just 2 days later. Why? We'll explore that in the next chapter. Because whoever that man was, he didn't just try to enter the estate. He tried twice. And what happened after that would leave detectives with more questions than answers. It started at 9:17 p.m. on December 13th, just hours before the murders. A single phone call, no voicemail, no second attempt, no text follow-up. But whatever was said in those 6 minutes and 32 seconds has haunted detectives, fractured the case timeline, and cast doubt on everything we thought we knew. Because that call was Rob Reiner's last, and whoever was on the other end still hasn't been identified. Let's rewind. Rob wasn't known for late-night calls. According to his phone records, his typical communication window ended around 8 p.m. Most nights, he'd be offline, winding down with Michelle, wine, old movies, sometimes just quiet reflection in the den. But on December 13th, something changed. At 9:17 p.m., Rob received an incoming call from a non-saved number, one never before seen in his call logs. The phone, an iPhone 14 Pro, registered the number, but displayed it only as unknown caller. It wasn't a spam call, not a robocall. It was live. It connected. And 6 minutes later, when it ended, Rob was seen, for the last time on internal camera, pacing near the fireplace, his left hand to his forehead, muttering the words. Why now? That phrase was picked up by the home's smart speaker, which had voice-activated listening enabled. And it's the only known piece of dialogue attributed to Rob after the phone call. Why now? The call triggered something, according to Michelle's iMessages, which detectives accessed with her device passcode. She texted Romy at 9:38 p.m. Hey, everything okay on your end? Dad just got a weird call. Kind of rattled. I'll let you know if anything comes of it. Romy never responded. She had already gone to bed, her phone on Do Not Disturb. That text is now the last written message Michelle ever sent. Investigators immediately tried to trace the incoming call. It had bounced through 3 towers. An old burner technique used to create confusion in GPS tracking. Worse, the number had been purchased using a prepaid SIM card activated the day before. No ID required. Paid in cash. The device itself was a low-end track phone. Security footage from the cell phone kiosk in Glendale, where the SIM was sold, showed only a partial image of the buyer. A person in a black hoodie, sunglasses, and gloves. They kept their head down, paid an exact change, and then vanished. So what do we know about the call? Not much, but more than you'd expect. Because Rob, ever the private but cautious man, had installed an encrypted backup app that saved fragments of voice-to-text transcriptions for incoming calls. Normally, these are used to generate call summaries. But on this night, they captured just 9 transcribed words before the caller disabled the connection. If he finds out, it's over. That's where the log ends. The rest? Silence. No metadata. No continuation. But those words were enough. Enough to send shivers down Romy's spine. Enough to make LAPD pause the formal charges for 48 hours. And enough to suggest that Rob wasn't the only target. Let's break that line down. If he finds out, it's over. Who's he? Nick? Was someone afraid he'd discover something? Or was he Rob? Had Rob uncovered something he wasn't supposed to? Something worth killing for? This is where the story twists into even darker territory. Because this one sentence sparked a total reevaluation of the crime. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't so linear. It wasn't just Nick killed his parents. Now the question became, what had Rob found out just before he died? Turns out, Rob had been doing some private digging in the final days of his life. According to a retired attorney who had worked with Reiner on estate documents, Rob had recently requested access to old medical files, psychiatric evaluations, and a family-held legal trust. Specifically, he had asked about Nick's mental health records from his teenage years, a 2008 sealed family arbitration involving incident management, an unnamed trustee who had access to the Brentwood estate accounts. Rob had also pulled a background check on someone. The name redacted in reports? Dean Lavelle. Yes. The same man whose DNA was later found in the bloodied glove. So what was Rob doing? Was he tying loose ends? Was he trying to protect Romy? Or was he getting ready to confront someone? If he was, he never got the chance. But here's the darkest piece. According to LAPD's internal report, someone else was scheduled to arrive at the estate the morning of December 14th. A family therapist. Not Dr. Langston, the regular one Nick had seen. A new therapist. One recommended by Romy. An email chain between Romy, Michelle, and the therapist, Dr. K. Winters, confirmed the meeting. It was set for 10 a.m. sharp. The subject line? Mediation, guest house situation. But Rob and Michelle never showed. Because they were already dead. The therapist waited in the driveway for 15 minutes. She rang the bell, called the house line, texted Romy. No answer. At 10:23 a.m., she drove away, assuming the session had been canceled. That afternoon, Romy arrived, and the nightmare began. So, was that final call warning Rob? Threatening him? Or pleading with him? Was it a stranger? Or someone Rob knew? Romy believes it was someone in the family circle. Someone who knew exactly what to say to shake him. Someone who had a reason to stall, or silence, Rob before the morning mediation. Someone who didn't want the guest house situation exposed. Remember, the phrase was, if he finds out, it's over. We, not I, not you, we. Who's we? That's the part that keeps detectives up at night, because it suggests there was more than one person behind the plan, or at the very least, that someone else knew, and let it happen. And then there's the follow-up, because that call wasn't the only mystery communication that night. At 10:51 p.m., 94 minutes later, Michelle Reiner received a call on her cell. Same burner number. Only this time, she didn't answer. The phone rang 4 times, then stopped. It was the last incoming call on her phone before it went dark at 12:04 a.m. So what does that mean? Was the caller panicking, checking if Rob had told her? Or worse, confirming whether the murders had already taken place? Investigators believe that second call may have been a mistake, a slip-up, a moment of panic from a person watching things spiral out of control, because that call pinged a new tower closer to the Brentwood estate. Whoever made it, they were nearby, not in Glendale, not in West Hollywood, Brentwood, within walking distance, perhaps even watching the house, perhaps waiting for the lights to go out, perhaps ready to step in if Nick didn't follow through. But here's the most chilling theory. What if the final call, the first one to Rob, wasn't a threat? What if it was a warning? What if someone inside the family, or close to it, knew something was about to happen and tried to stop it? The words, if he finds out, it's over, could also mean, if Rob finds out what's being planned, he'll stop it. And the unfinished, we, could have been, we have to stop him. Or, we didn't want this. Or even, we weren't supposed to go this far. We'll never know, because that caller has vanished. They never activated that burner again. They never used the SIM. They never called Romy. They never came forward. Not when the story broke. Not when the charges were filed. Not even when Nick Reiner was arraigned in court. Looking blank, broken, and bruised, that silence is deafening. Because someone, right now, knows what was said in that call. And they're saying nothing. But they're out there. And if that person was involved, if they helped set the stage, then the Brentwood murders were not a solo act. They were a collaboration, a co-written script. And in that case, there's one name that's about to come back into focus. The name that mysteriously vanished from the suspect list. 2 days after the murders. And when you hear why it disappeared, you'll realize this story isn't just a tragedy. It's a cover-up. Every homicide investigation begins with a list. A suspect list. People close to the victims. People with motive. People with opportunity. In most cases, that list grows and shrinks quickly Names added, removed, refined, until the truth emerges. But in the Reiner case, something strange happened. Because one name, a name that appeared in the early hours of the investigation, mentioned in witness statements, flagged in the logs, suddenly disappeared. And no one can explain why. Not the LAPD, not the DA, not even the Reiner family. But once you understand who that person is, and what their connection to the family truly was, you'll start to see this case not just as a tragic murder, but as a puzzle that someone is desperate to keep unsolved. Let's go back to the night of the murders, December 14th. At 10:48 p.m., the Reiner's smart gate system registered an unusual activity, a failed key code entry. Someone tried to open the front gate. They had a code, but it didn't work. 3 minutes later, another attempt. Same result. The system flagged it. Sent a ping to Rob's phone. No response. That code belonged to someone named Benjamin Wise. Who is that? A former family friend. A film financier. A man who, years earlier, had reportedly partnered with Rob Reiner on a shelved project. A true crime drama that never got made. The project fell apart. Their friendship fizzled. According to two former assistants, Rob and Michelle distanced themselves from Benjamin for what was vaguely described as inappropriate conduct and manipulative behavior. He hadn't been inside the Brentwood house in over 2 years. So why did he try to enter the night they were killed? And why was he removed from the suspect list 48 hours later, without explanation? The first sign that something was off came from internal chatter. According to an anonymous officer working the case, Benjamin Wise was listed in the initial persons of interest file distributed to detectives on day one. His name appeared just below Nick Reiner's, with a note. Key code attempt, December 14th, 10:48 p.m. There was even a notation suggesting a follow-up interview be scheduled. But it never happened. Instead, on the morning of December 16th, the revised file was circulated. And Benjamin's name? Gone. When the officer asked his superior why, he was told, "It's been handled. He's clear." No further explanation. No interview. No verification. Just erased. And the deeper detectives looked, the more confusing it got. Because Benjamin did have motive. And means. And a history. Let's talk motive. 3 months before the murders, Benjamin Wise had been sued in civil court for misappropriation of funds related to a shelved documentary project. The plaintiff? Nick Reiner. Yes, the same Nick now accused of murder. In the filing, Nick alleged that Benjamin took a $200,000 investment meant for production and instead used it to pay off personal debt. Nick's evidence? Emails, bank transfers, and one damning voice memo in which Benjamin allegedly said, "Your dad might scare others, but he doesn't scare me. He owes me more than you know." Rob and Michelle, when informed, allegedly refused to get involved. But it got worse. Sources say Benjamin began showing up uninvited at events where the Reiners were expected. Charity galas, screenings, Writers Guild mixers. Always in the background. Always watching. A family friend told investigators. He was bitter. You could see it. He felt like he was owed something. Like they'd stolen something from him. Now let's talk means. Benjamin Wise wasn't just a producer. He had military training. Discharged from the Israeli Defense Forces in 2001. He also had access to equipment, surveillance tools, and, according to one of his exes, a weird obsession with private cameras. When police reviewed the footage from December 14th, they noticed something odd. The camera aimed at the east side of the guest house, the one place Nick couldn't see from his window, had a blip. Not a total blackout like the others. Just a subtle flicker. A flash of movement. Frame stutter. Then nothing. Tech analysts later concluded the camera had been looped. Played back on a 5-second delay. A technique used to make it appear like nothing was moving. But to do that, you need proximity, access, knowledge, which is why the officers originally flagged Benjamin as a possible co-conspirator. Yet still, no follow-up interview. And the most chilling part? A message, sent from Benjamin's encrypted Proton Mail account to an unknown recipient. Subject, 13th hour. The body? All stories have a final scene. He's already rehearsed it. Let the credits roll. Sent at 2:11 a.m., December 14th. Roughly 2 hours after the estimated time of death. Who is it to? We don't know. Proton Mail's encryption makes it nearly impossible to trace without a court order. The recipient never responded. But when the email was uncovered, Officers tried again to flag Benjamin. Their request? Denied. Reason? Mr. Wise has legal representation and has been cleared. By whom? They won't say. Romy, when informed of the timeline, broke down. She told detectives, "He was always lurking. My parents thought it was just awkwardness, but I think it was darker than that." She then added, "Nick hated him, but Benjamin flattered him, gave him attention. I think he used Nick, fed the paranoia, planted ideas, maybe even pushed him into the screenplay stuff." That theory, that Benjamin helped script the crime, is now gaining traction in online forums and amateur investigation circles. Because when you step back, it's almost too perfect. A son with a motive, a family divided, a trail of evidence that seems just a little too clean, and a man with every reason to want revenge and just enough skill to orchestrate it without leaving a trace. The final straw? A business card, found beneath a floor mat in Nick's car during a routine sweep. It had one name, no logo, no company, just Benjamin Wise, and a handwritten message. "Think bigger. They always underestimated you." Written in red ink. The same red ink found on the margins of the screenplay titled The Guest House, the one where the character based on Nick murders his parents, sits silently on the steps, smiles, and says nothing. So why was Benjamin removed from the suspect list? Why wasn't he arrested? Why was he never even interviewed? Some believe he has legal leverage. Others say he has dirt on people high up. A few even whisper that he's part of a larger cover-up, a Hollywood fixer class that protects its own. But the result? A potential co-conspirator is free, walking, watching, waiting. And Nick? He's alone in a jail cell, silent, staring at walls, maybe protecting someone, or maybe just finishing the story he was given. And you know what the scariest part is? Benjamin hasn't been seen publicly since December 17th. No photos, no sightings. His phone is off. His office closed. He vanished, just as the case began to unravel. And when LAPD was asked for an official statement on why he was cleared, they declined to comment, which leaves us with only speculation. But speculation, in this case, may be the only honest thing left. Because someone helped make this happen. Someone manipulated the cracks in this family. Someone erased their name and let the trail go cold. And the only person who might still know the full truth? Romy. Because just days later, she gave a speech that stopped everyone cold. A speech that turned the vigil for her parents into something far more haunting. And what she said, without saying it, left the crowd stunned. It sounds like something out of a bad Hollywood pitch. A disgraced son, a broken family, a luxurious mansion hiding ugly truths. Throw in a murder, and you've got a Netflix thriller waiting to happen. But what if I told you it already almost did? What if the Reiner tragedy, the double homicide, the buried resentment, the guest house secrets, was nearly turned into a reality series? And what if, just weeks before the killings, Nick Reiner was shopping around a disturbing pitch? That mirrored real life a little too closely, because this chapter of the story is about the project no one was supposed to know about. A project that may have predicted, or even inspired, the murders that followed. Let's talk about the Reiner tapes. It began innocently enough. Nick Reiner, after years of personal and creative struggles, was said to be in a productive phase last summer. He had reportedly reconnected with an old friend from film school, a producer who had since transitioned into reality TV development. The friend, who we'll call Liam, worked at a mid-tier streaming service known for edgy docu-style shows. Think true crime meets confessional therapy. Liam says Nick reached out in August with a proposal. Here's the pitch, in Nick's own words. It's not a show. It's a reckoning. It's about how legacy warps people, how family turns into performance. It's a documentary, a therapy session, a confession booth. And it starts in the guest house. Yes, the guest house. According to Liam, Nick's idea was raw but compelling. He wanted to shoot interviews with each family member, Rob, Michelle, Romy, and himself, with minimal crew, all inside the Brentwood estate. The concept? Unfiltered access. Each person would talk to camera, alone in a room, like a deposition. The goal? To air out the unspoken. As Nick described it, we'll finally say the things no one ever said. We'll treat the cameras like a courtroom. No yelling, just truth. But the working title? The Reiner Tapes, A Family's Final Cut. Dark, ironic, a little on the nose. Too on the nose. Rob and Michelle were never supposed to find out. That was the plan, at least. Nick wanted to record his segment first, then Romy's. He said once he had enough footage, he'd pitch it properly and use their responses as leverage. His exact words? Once they see we're already doing it, they'll have to play ball. Otherwise, they look like they're hiding something. Liam was hesitant. He tried to walk Nick back, told him this wasn't ethical, that he was playing with fire. Nick reportedly responded, "So let it burn." Romy never agreed. In fact, when Liam reached out to her via DM to ask if she'd be open to a sit-down interview for a potential docuseries, she reportedly replied, "No. And if Nick's behind this, you need to shut it down. This family is not a story. Not for you. Not for anyone." She blocked Liam minutes later. 2 days later, she called her parents. According to a family friend who overheard part of the conversation, Romy told her mother, "He's filming things again. He's getting that look in his eye. Like he's outside the scene, watching it all happen. Like it's a movie he's directing." That sentence would haunt her. Because just weeks later, it became a movie, a horror film, in real life. And the director was arrested at the scene. But what's even more disturbing, Nick did begin recording, without permission. Liam later told police that Nick had started rolling tape on his iPhone. He claimed to have filmed himself in the guest house, delivering monologues to camera. Dramatic, tortured, full of veiled references to real-life conflicts. Some of the transcripts provided to detectives include lines like, "They told me I was the problem, but they built the problem. Fed it. I just decided to show them the ending." And, "Romy gets the applause. I get the silence. But silence is powerful. It echoes. It fills a house." He also recorded at least one scene of himself walking through the estate at night, whispering into the lens, referencing rooms by name. This is where he writes his legacy. This is where she cries into wine. This is where I became invisible. No one knew these videos existed until Liam came forward. He was horrified and scared because after the murders, he realized Nick had been rehearsing. The LAPD found one of the recordings during their digital forensics sweep. The file was titled Final Cut, Master.mov. Its timestamp, December 13th, one day before the murders. It showed Nick seated in a chair, staring into camera, a single lamp behind him, shadows cast across his face. He speaks slowly, clearly, no emotion. Here's part of the transcript. Every story needs a climax. The moment the truth shatters the illusion. I think that moment is close. And when it comes, I want to be holding the camera. He smiles, then reaches out. The frame goes black. Detectives stopped watching after that. They didn't need more. And yet, the project nearly went forward. Despite the clear red flags, Liam, perhaps thinking it was still fiction, sent the footage to a development exec. That exec allegedly pitched it in a blind meeting with a streaming service just 2 weeks before the killings. The pitch line? It's Succession meets the Jinx. With real family, real blood. The buyer passed. Said it felt too raw. Thank God. But still, the tapes exist. And now they're in evidence lockup. Labeled as Reiner, Nick, unreleased project, possible intent document. Because they're not just recordings. They're foreshadowing. They're an artist or a manipulator, creating a narrative he may have been planning to live out. But here's where it gets even creepier. After the murders, Liam received a package. No return address. Inside, a single mini DV tape. Old format. Obsolete. No label. He had to dig out an adapter just to watch it. What he saw shook him, because it wasn't new footage. It was from years earlier, a home video. Nick, Romy, their parents, sitting around a holiday table. Everyone smiling, laughing. Except Nick. He's behind a camera, silent, zooming in on each face, holding the lens a little too long. And at the end, he whispers, "One day, you'll see the real version." Cut to black. Liam turned over the tape to police. He hasn't spoken to Nick since. But when asked whether he thought Nick planned this, the murders, the arrest, the coverage, Liam said something that still chills reporters. He always wanted to direct something unforgettable. I think he finally did. But there's one more twist. Someone else may have helped him, helped write the pitch, shape the story, maybe even encouraged the darkest version of it. And that someone was seen attending a vigil in Brentwood just days after the murders, standing in the back, sunglasses at night, watching Romy speak. Not clapping, not crying, just watching. And when Romy looked out at the crowd, she paused. Her gaze locked for just a second. Then she said the most cryptic line of the night. Some people came here to mourn. Others came to make sure their secrets stayed buried. Then she stepped back, dropped the mic, and walked away. Who was she talking about? What secret? And more importantly, what secret was Michelle trying to send Romy, but never got the chance to? Because in the days after her death, Romy found a sealed letter, hidden in a drawer, unsent, unmailed, but very real. And what it contained might finally explain why Rob and Michelle were about to cut Nick out forever, and why someone, or multiple someones, made sure that never happened. If you want to understand the fire, you have to study the sparks. Because Nick Reiner didn't wake up one morning and decide to destroy his family. This didn't start in Brentwood. It didn't start with a screenplay or a guest house or a key code that failed at midnight. It started much earlier. In silence. In scribbles. In the dark corners of a broken mind. Recorded in a journal he never meant for anyone to read. Until now. This chapter isn't about murder. Not exactly. It's about descent. And the trail of writing left behind that paints a picture far more terrifying than anything the police found at the crime scene. Because the words Nick put to paper, they weren't just thoughts. They were warnings. Warnings no one read. Not until it was too late. Let's go back to 2017. Nick Reiner had just exited his third stint in rehab, a private, high-end facility in Arizona. He had money, time, and parents who desperately wanted him to heal. He also had a notebook, a simple leather-bound journal gifted to him by a counselor named Daryl, who believed writing could be a form of therapy. Nick took it, and for a while, it worked. The first entries are lucid, honest, painful. He talks about detox, withdrawal, guilt. My parents love me more than I love myself. I want to be clean. I want to be real again. It's the writing of a young man trying to claw his way back into a version of himself he once believed in. But somewhere around page 34, the tone shifts. The writing becomes erratic. Words scratched out. Sentences that trail off. New entries written in third person, then second, then first again. And that's when a new voice appears. Or maybe just a new version of Nick. He gives this version a name, director. The director doesn't apologize. He doesn't plead. He narrates. From page 52. Director watched Nick sob today. Weak. Useless. Director knows better. He sees the ending. Page 56. They think he's healing. He's not. He's listening. Director is whispering now. Page 59. He wrote a scene today where the family eats dinner in silence. The food is cold. The love is dead. They pretend to laugh. Then the lights go out. This isn't recovery. This is splintering. And it only gets worse. The journal, recovered after the murders from a locked file drawer in Nick's guest house, contains over 180 pages. Most written between 2017 and 2020. But some entries are newer. Much newer. One page, dated November 25, 2023, less than 3 weeks before the murders, reads, I saw Romy again. She smiled like she was in a show. She says she wants me to get better. What she means is disappear. Another. They talk in whispers when I'm not around. But Wall's here. Director hears. They're writing me out of the script. That last line repeats again and again in the final section of the journal. They're writing me out. They're writing me out. They're writing me out. It's carved into the paper. Deep enough to leave dents. So deep, one page tore. This paranoia wasn't isolated. His rehab notes, recovered through a subpoenaed release from a confidential facility in Malibu, confirms several alarming behaviors. Auditory hallucinations. Delusional episodes. Persistent fixation on family betrayal. In one incident report, Nick reportedly told a counselor, my sister is trying to take my place. Another, my dad is editing my life without my permission. He believed he was being filmed, watched, judged, all the time. He told one psychiatrist, there's a laugh track when I cry. That psychiatrist recommended a 72-hour psychiatric hold. Rob and Michelle intervened. They didn't want him committed. They wanted him home. And so, he came back. To the guest house. To the surveillance cameras. To the same walls he thought were recording him. And that's when the journal took on its final, most dangerous form. The last 15 pages are titled, Final Draft. They aren't diary entries. They're scenes, structured like a script, each one more violent than the last, each one mirroring the family dynamic, but twisted, warped. In one scene, a character called Father locks the kitchen door every night, convinced someone will enter and hurt him. In another, sister erases son's name from a photo album, whispering, "We don't need him anymore." But the last scene? It's blank. Just the words. Finale TBD. TBD, to be determined. Left open, unfinished, or waiting to be acted out. And days later, it was. So what does this mean? Was Nick possessed by this director persona? Was it a dissociative identity? A narrative coping mechanism? Or was it just metaphor? Art as expression? Doctors can't say. But the result is chilling.